Welcome to the Legacy Pod. In episode 1 I spoke with Heber Cannon, a filmmaker, content creator and one half of the YouTube sensation, the Buttery Bros. Heber spoke about his career behind the camera, charting the rise of CrossFit, one of the fastest growing sports in the world. He spoke about the risk of going alone when he was fired from CrossFit, but ultimately the reward of taking control of his own future. We looked at his pathway into filmmaking and ultimately the decision that led to him jumping in front of the camera with friend and business partner Martin Sawyers to launch the Buttery Bros. I hope you enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed recording. Did you ever anticipate you would start what you started?
No, we always joke that we live a quarter mile at a time, from the Fast and Furious references. But we didn't anticipate that we would be doing what we're doing now. We set out to make a documentary about the CrossFit season that was really crazy in 2019. We were let go. CrossFit was making all these changes to the sport. And we thought it was an interesting story, and that was what we set out to tell. The Buttery Bros channel was just a vehicle to get to what we thought our bigger project was going to be, which was the documentary and a documentary series about it. Quickly, after a few months, we realized that our passion and success wasn't going to be validated through the series. It was going to be validated and come through the Buttery Bros channel. And that became very apparent very quick. And so, no, we didn't anticipate to be doing what we were doing now, but it's definitely a dream come true and just having a total blast doing what we're doing.
I remember sitting watching the very first episode that you guys put out. And the weird thing was, I was just getting into CrossFit at that point. But the weird thing about it was you immediately felt as if you knew who you guys were, as if you'd always been there. It was the weirdest thing. Did you get that reaction?
What do you mean that we were always there?
So obviously,
in terms of CrossFit?
Yeah, so obviously people within the CrossFit sphere knew who you were. You had done the movies, you knew the athletes, you knew everyone at HQ, you worked at HQ. People who had no idea who you were, your content suddenly made you feel as if, I don't know, as if it was so relatable that your stuff had always been out there.
Yeah, I think maybe a little bit just because, so like you said, like we were all always there. Like we were just one step removed away from it. We were just behind the cameras for 10 years. Like I had been in the CrossFit community making this content for 11 years. And so if you'd been following me on Instagram, you had seen some of this stuff, but all we really did was I had a phone call or a text message with Brett Pikowski after I did a Road to the Games show. So I did a YouTube show about his day in the life and what he's doing as an athlete to prepare for the 2018 or 17 CrossFit Games. I think it was 17. And he said, he called me later and said, "Hey, I wanted to thank you for coming out and documenting and making this cool video about me in my prime. I can't wait to show my grandkids like how I used to be really cool because I'll be washed up and 60 at some point." And I remember thinking like, yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's cool. I should do that for me. Like I'm doing this for all these really cool other people, but I feel like I'm doing cool things and I don't have anything to show my kids of what I do. I just show what other people do. And so I started making like a family vlog at the time, but it turned into like this became a really easy thing for us to do, which was we just let people in on what we do very naturally, which is we go do really fun things and we have a really good time in the gym. Yeah. And like none of that's manufactured. All of that's kind of what we'd always been doing anyways. And I think why it felt so natural for the community or for our viewers is because we're really just flipping the camera around and giving people an inside access to what we do when we're out producing these documentaries or movies or interacting with these high profile athletes.
How much did it take you by surprise that you were immediately part of a wider community and part of people's lives, people like me, people all over the world that suddenly were coming across your content, liked what you were doing, and suddenly, like for example, I've reached out to you, I've DM'd you, no idea if you're going to respond back, and you must get stuff like that all the time. Suddenly, like how strange was that to wrap your head around, that suddenly you had this huge audience that wanted to kind of be your buddies?
That's still crazy to me. Like we experienced it. We experienced it very early on when we launched our channel. We experienced it like this weekend. I just got back from an event in Texas, and I was like, I can't believe all these people from Texas want to come hang out and know me. And we'll be at a restaurant, and someone will come sit down and talk to me about pancakes. And I remember getting the weirdest interaction. I've had it happen twice when we went to London. Both years that I've been to London while doing this, the first time we got off the train system there, we were looking for we were looking for whatever it takes, the store there. And I got off the subway too early, and I come out of the stairs, I'm looking around, and some guy comes up. He's like, "Hey, it's the Buttery Bros." I was like,
"You look around you.
World am I in a different country right now on the other side of the planet?" And some guy finds me immediately after walking out of a subway tunnel in the middle of downtown London. And then he went out of his way, like 2 kilometers, to walk us to where we needed to go, dropped us off, and then went on his way. And I don't know who that person is now. But that guy was super helpful. And so, yes, it's really crazy on one side, especially when it's in person. Online, it's very virtual. I think social media and interaction on social channels has really changed how society reacts and relates and communicates, but it's still just like text messages on a screen. So like if you're messaging me, like I respond to everybody, just because like that's just something we've done from the beginning, and we try to do as much as we possibly can. At some point, we hope it becomes too much for us to do, but I would like to be as involved in communicating with our audience as much as possible, just because we're so grateful to be able to do what we're doing. And so that's the biggest thing for us, is just gratitude for people that want to watch.
Was the one moment that you sort of realized, okay, this is taking off, this is more than just like a hobby, or this is more than just a handful of people? Was that one milestone moment you can remember?
Not exactly one moment, because it's like I'm very weirdly business minded when it comes to this stuff. So I went into, like, there's 2 different avenues, right? Like there's a documentary, and I went into it like there was no question that it wasn't going to be successful. It was just, how are we going to do it? How are we going to make it happen? And this just sort of happened naturally as a result of that. Yeah. So there was a big shift after doing it for about 5 months, where we used to be like, hey, well, we used to be shopping ourselves around as commercial producers. So like a brand would call us and be like, hey, we want you to go shoot a commercial of these 3 athletes. Can you go do that? And then we would shoot a Buttery Bros episode behind that. So like we would go out and be with Matt Fraser shooting a thing for one of his sponsors. And then in our free time, we just turn the camera on ourselves and eat, whatever Sammy was cooking. There became a shift when I realized that what we were doing on our Buttery Bros channel was way more valuable to people, or brands specifically, than what our commercials were. And so I was able to remove this work and sort of brand this stuff over here, and be able to not have to do 3 jobs and just do one job really well. And that was a big shift that happened around June of 2019. And after that point, we stopped doing commercial work for big people, and that became a huge moment of knowing that I could live through it. Yeah. Up until that point, like January to June was really like scrambling to be able to get things going. And then June, we realized we have to make a leap. We have to trust ourselves. And from that next 6 weeks, it became very important for us to focus inwardly and on Buttery Bros content, so that we could create the best Buttery shows and the best documentary of 2019 that was possible. And that kind of set up the business for going forward.
How scary a moment was that? Because obviously with a family to provide for, food to put on the table, you've got to make that leap. But I guess if you look at it from one point of view, a lot of people would say you already had like an amazing job creating different things, but did you feel as if you wanted to be a bit more in control of what you did for yourself? There's a couple of different questions there. Sorry.
Well, there's two different elements. When I was working for CrossFit, I loved my job at CrossFit. I loved the community that we had there. And then when I left and I was able to do it under my terms, like that June was epic. We had some amazing shoots. We shot this episode where we were flying helicopters, riding around in razors, and doing workouts, like just exploring southern Utah. And then we went from that straight out to Boston, where we hung out with Katrin David's daughter, Brooke Wells, Amanda Barnhart, doing a Comtrain camp weekend. And like we had these 2 back-to-back weekends. At that point, it was like, that's all I want to do. Like, this is just fun things that I want to do. And I'm going to bring a camera along, and I know I can make interesting things. I know I'd watch it. I hope others will. And you just hope that that's the case. The risk factor was really, it was there. I think I had proved the concept at that point, but I was nervous about a few things, mainly like family life. Just because to be successful, I have to be on the road all the time. And we had moved from Salt Lake City, Utah to California to work for CrossFit. So we're there for 10 years. I was traveling like a quarter of what I was doing with the Buttery Bros. And so when I'm traveling, I now have my wife and 2 kids stuck at home and not a huge support group in California. There was a little bit that we had developed, but not like family. Yeah. And so we actually moved back from Santa Cruz because for a few reasons. One, I was like, we're making a financial jump here. I think it will work, but there's never a guarantee. But that wasn't ever why. It was more the family support system. So if I'm going to be traveling as much as I can, I will be for the next couple months to pull this off. My wife wanted help from her parents and my parents. So we moved into my parents' basement, which we thought was going to be a 3-month interim until we found somewhere to rent in Salt Lake. And we ended up living there for 18 months and moved out like just 2 months ago. But it was risky. It was nerve wracking, but I always felt like we had a safety net to some degree.
Did you, even with that safety net, did you feel as if that was something worth taking the risk for because of just how it made you feel, the stuff you got to do, the experiences that you were having?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, we had so many things cool that were lined up for the CrossFit Games, and then we had Miami lined up soon after that, and then we had back to southern Utah, Aruba, and Hawaii all kind of coming up in the next 5 to 6 weeks, and I was like, yeah, these are fun things that are going to happen in my life, and whether people come along for the ride or not, like, I want to do these things. And that's sort of always been a mantra for me whenever I was working for CrossFit. I had a lot of creative freedom there. They were great to work with. And one of the things I always kind of focused on whenever I was pitching a project was, is this something that I would have watched as a super fan of the sport? Because I came into this, I don't know how many other people have had this experience, but like when I discovered CrossFit, I was all in. Like I would come home, I would weigh out all my meals. I would get on YouTube and watch CrossFit videos of people doing Fight Combat or Freddy's Revenge or whatever CrossFit was putting out back in the time, which were these janky videos with really loud and obnoxious music. And I was like, I was in. And so now looking back at that, I'm like, how can I create something that's really relatable and really fun that people would want to watch? And this is kind of what we've come up with.
So we'll get into CrossFit in a minute, the actual, working there, but to rewind back to the beginning, did you always want to be a filmmaker? Was that always where your passion was? Or was it something you sort of fell into?
But not a documentary filmmaker.
Okay.
So I like when I was 5 or 4, it would have been 1988 or 89, so I would have been 4 or 5. My brother was making like what are web sketches now or sketch comedy things for his high school. And one of the sketches they did was they were like, we're really cool seniors. How did we get so cool? So they went back to the future and recreated the movie Back to the Future, and to go back to when they were kids to see how they were so cool. Well, I was his younger version of himself. Okay. So I'm like this 4-year-old kid experiencing what it's like to be in front of the camera, behind the camera, and then coming downstairs in the basement and watching him edit from one VHS tape to another VHS tape, and then adding music. And I was like, oh, wow, this is so cool. And then slowly from that point on, I started making like skating videos to sketch comedy stuff in high school to my senior year of high school. I didn't really think of it as a career opportunity. It was always just a hobby. My senior year of high school, I discovered like, oh no, this is like a real thing. Like this isn't just a long shot. I could do this. I'm good at this. Yeah. So it became very clear my senior year of high school that I wanted to make movies. My plan was to go to college and then go down to Hollywood and work in the system somehow. And then I kind of stumbled upon CrossFit because alongside with all this, I've had a huge fascination with fitness. So when the opportunity came to go work with this new growing young company that needed content, and I was fascinated with the subject, it was a perfect fit for me and the brand, and it worked out really well.
So CrossFit was a sort of detour, or got in your way as you went to Hollywood, sort of thing?
Yeah, totally. 100%. Wow. And when I talk to friends in Hollywood, they're like, look, like, we could help you out, but you should definitely take this CrossFit gig, because if things come up and we can set up meetings for you, you're 4 hours north of me. So it's much easier flight from Santa Cruz to get to LA than Salt Lake, or a drive. So yeah, go to Santa Cruz, do your thing, and when the timing's right, we'll bring you down. The workload at CrossFit became so heavy that I didn't end up going down to LA very much until, actually, ironically, 2018.
Wow. So you also, it's pretty rare that you get in the ground for something like CrossFit. You know, you're one of, obviously, you were part of the sport as it exploded. A bit like the Buttery Bros, did you realise what the sport was going to become? Did you have any idea the movement that it was going to become? Or did you just sort of get a sense of, this is raw, this is fun, let's go with it?
Both. So I got into the sport in 2008, really got into the 2008 Games documentary that Savon Matassian produced that came out in like May of 2009. It was really cool. And like, I would watch any video I could. Yeah. Like, I found like iPhone videos or anything that anyone had published on YouTube or Vimeo or whatever websites, Facebook, that I could find about the 2008 CrossFit Games. And I knew all the competitors. And so then, as a fan, not collaborating with CrossFit at all, I went down to the 2009 Games. And I was like, I want to compete. Like, this is my jam. I love this. I'd be good at this sport. Yeah. Totally not the case, but you know, a kid can dream. And so I went down to the 2009 Games thinking like, 2010, I'm going to bulk up. That's my biggest weakness is strength. And I'm going to come in and I want to do this as my sport. Not necessarily thinking that I was going to document it, but while at the 2009 Games, I could definitely see the potential of what the sport could be. I was like, this is cool. It's grassroots. It's beautiful. The athletes all of them are insanely good looking to look at. Like, there's eye candy. The test is very interesting and not like subjective. Like, the science behind it was cool. So I saw a huge trajectory of what CrossFit the sport could be. And when I got back, that's when I reached out to CrossFit and was like, hey, I'm a filmmaker here in Salt Lake City. There's a couple of top athletes that were at the 2009 Games. I'd love to document them going into the 2010 season.
So who was on the ground at that point? Were you a bit of a pioneer when it came to realising there was a gap for the content? Did you sort of forge that path on your own, or was there already a kind of team in place?
So they had a director of media, a guy named Tony Budding. They had Sevon was contracted. Sevon and his buddy Carrie Peterson, who also had produced that 2008 documentary, and they were on site at the 2009 Games and produced a whole like 18-part series about the 2009 Games that you can go and watch. That's great. It's fascinating. So they did. They had a team, but those guys weren't. They were contracted. They weren't salary based that I know of. They might have been, and they weren't a part of the official media team. On the actual media team was Tony Budding and Patrick Barber. Pat Barber, soon after the Games, I think, quit and moved out to New Zealand with his girlfriend or something, and has since started a life of his own and successful in his own right. And they hired this guy named Rory McKernan. Yep. And so when I went down initially for my first interview with CrossFit, it was Rory McKernan and Tony Budding were the only two people working in that office. And by the time I came down, because I contracted for a year, at the end of that year, they had another part-time editor that was working there, and then a guy named Leif Edmondson. So when I moved to CrossFit as a full-time salary employee, there was 4 people as a part of the media team at that time.
And what was it like at that point? Did you feel as if it was like a blank canvas for this new emerging sport that was unlike anything else that was on the go?
I wouldn't say a blank canvas, especially because the Tony guy had some really specific demands.
Okay.
So my creativity was extremely limited. In 2010, I just kind of was contracted. I would go every other weekend to go do cool things, and but they needed something more substantial. They needed like a news show, and they needed to prepare for live television. And so those are two things that I have. Like, I never watch the news.
Yeah.
And I never watch live sports just because I'm like, I'll watch like the Super Bowl or like a really good game, but I'm not like, oh man, the game's on, I got to go watch it. I've always felt like my time is more productive doing other things. So when they asked me to come in and work full time on those things, I was like, I don't really want to move to Santa Cruz. I didn't really think it was that great of a town, but I saw the movie The Social Network, which is about Facebook, the movie about Facebook.
Yeah.
And the story of Eduardo Severin really hit me, where like, he had stayed home. He stayed in New York and didn't come to the West Coast. And as a result of it, he missed out on this Facebook opportunity, which ended up making him millions of dollars. So he didn't have it that tough. But in my head, I was like, no, I want to be a part of it. I want to be a part of this family. I want to go help this community grow. And so I went down to CrossFit and did a job that I really didn't like for like 2 years. And then from that point forward, the doors were off and I was able to just play from 2013 really on.
What was the job? What was the job you didn't like?
It was live television. So like I created the update show, which they continued on until 2018. And I think they're going to revamp with the guy that kind of took over a job that I had named Charlie Duvey. He's a great dude. Very talented, and it's like perfect for what he does. And then, so the update show, and then live production. So like sitting in the truck saying, ready, camera one, take one, ready, camera two, take two. Like, those are great things, but I would rather direct a commercial that goes in the Super Bowl than direct the Super Bowl. Okay. Like, that's just kind of where my creative mind goes. Yeah. I'm not like, I can create a big fun live thing, but it's not always the most fun for me. So I knew, like, I don't want that stress in my life. This is what I want to do. And if I can't do that, I'm going to make some changes. And then if we sort of jump forward slightly, I remember sitting at work with my buddy, and again, we'd only really got into CrossFit about 7 months previously, when all the changes happened and all the news started breaking about, you know, the media team being cut, which you were obviously part of. And these were changes that had no impact on us whatsoever. But you felt impacted. You're like, oh my God, what does this mean for CrossFit? It means nothing for us, but obviously meant it was life-changing for you. I mean, what was it like at that point when essentially your dream job is sort of taken away from you? At that point, it wasn't actually a dream job. Like, at that point in my career, it was like I was ready for a new challenge, and I was ready for other things. And so it was good timing for what I wanted to do in my career. It just kind of pushed me off the ledge. Okay. And so I was ready to jump. I wasn't CrossFit it's funny, they used to tell gym owners, if you want to have a successful gym, if you don't want your trainers to leave and open a competing gym down the street, give your trainers an opportunity and a financial reward that they can't get other places. And CrossFit at that point wasn't providing those opportunities for me. And so it was like, I'm not growing, my growth within the company isn't going anywhere. And I don't see eye to eye with a lot of the leadership. Like, it's time for me to move. But I was really set on making the 2018 documentary that we had just finished shooting. And so it was negotiations time for me in my career moving forward based on trying to do that. And also at that time, weirdly enough, like we were letting go of half the media team already before we were let go. And in that window of time before I was let go and when they made these first really big changes, I was negotiating with the CEO at the time, Jeff Kane, about taking the 2018 documentary and owning it ourselves and finishing it. Like, that was a conversation I was having, and then being let go in the middle of that. So after I was let go, I was like, so wait, are we still doing this documentary thing? Or like, is that not happening? And so there was 4 or 5 weeks where that was being discussed. And then it immediately shifted from like, hey, this isn't going to happen. But Jeff was very adamant about like, hey, this isn't going to work out, but I really want to help you guys figure out the 2019 documentary. And so what can I do to help you guys establish that? Which was obviously
And that was the element that you did care about, the documentary, the creativity side of it, which must have been difficult.
Yeah, and those are the things that I love doing, and loved having ownership over and figuring out what the best story of the year was. So yeah, that was what I was passionate about, but during that same window of time, it was the first time that I went to LA and took meetings with very big agencies there about like what would my career look like if I came down here and did what I initially set out to do. We'll see if that ever happens at this point, but it was weird because it was like, I'm not working for CrossFit anymore, but I have two very different paths. Do I continue working in the community and this thing that we've kind of helped build, or do I completely rift off and go do something that I've thought about doing for my entire life, which is try and make actual movies?
Were you tempted to hit Hollywood?
Oh yeah, I definitely. And I went down to Hollywood and took meetings. Like it was fun, it was cool, and the meetings were like with people that I'd businesses that I never thought I'd get in the room with. Yeah. But I'm having similar conversations with some, like, what I saw was, I'm very passionate about this, and I would love to really see this through. And that's opened almost more doors than if I had just gone straight to Hollywood and even had success there. Especially, like, I don't know why I chose doing the community thing, but I felt very drawn to it, and I felt like I owed it to the athletes to help tell their story after like their livelihood's almost completely ruined. And I got really lucky because I feel like 2 years later, now that COVID's hit, had I gone to Hollywood, a lot of those productions have been shut down. So like it might've been a sign from heaven to let me know, like, no, go do this other thing. Cause this is what your family needs for the future.
And really, it wasn't that long ago when you had that choice to make, do this or do that. It's, time goes so
like
quickly.
26 months ago.
Yeah, that's incredible. Incredible. You made a really good point, and that was something I wanted to ask anyway. When it comes to telling the stories, whether it's a season or a competition, it seems like it's really difficult to storyboard something out. Like you almost have to see who does well. Obviously, we know who the sort of top athletes are, but do you go into scenarios? Do you go into competitions with an idea of what the story could be, or do you just have to literally wait and see how it goes?
It depends. So, like for the documentaries about the games specifically, we always have like, hey, we've got our eye on these 6 athletes. These are people that we spent leading up to the season with. Specifically for the fittest, we were like, look, there's going to be 200 athletes here competing for this weird year. Like it's usually 40. So it doesn't matter. We hope that we pick the winners. So Matt and Tia, and then everybody else, if they make it through the first cut or if they don't, that's an interesting story. And so you just have to focus on the personalities and make it relatable. And it doesn't matter if your favorite character gets killed off in the second episode. That's just storytelling, and that's real. And so going into the 2019 games, it was like, we've got these 6 athletes, and then anybody else that we can add to it, great. And so like Noah, we hadn't spent much time before, and we were able to spend, but we have a good relationship with him. So he was a natural fit into that story that year. This year at the CrossFit Games, we have definitely a story about what happened at the 2020 CrossFit Games in the season, but we only had to focus on 10 athletes, so it was very easy to get with as many of those as possible before the games happened. It wasn't easy, but we got with 8 out of the 10 athletes that were at the CrossFit Games.
What's been your what's been your favorite story that you've told? What's been the sort of, the best narrative over the last few years that you've come across or has unfolded in front of you?
I'm kind of always in the now. So like what I'm working on now is fascinating. Like 2018, even though we didn't do it, was I think a really cool, fascinating year. The 2017 year with Ricky Garrard having steroids was fascinating. 2016 when you had Catherine David's daughter losing her grandma and coming back and winning with the drama versus her and Tia and the emotions attached to Tia losing that year. that was fantastic, and emotional and beautiful, especially because it was the last year at the StubHub Center in California. The Froning movie I'm really close with, because like I'm following this guy who's an icon and a legend in the sport, and he's starting his new family, and things got really emotional producing that movie. So that's always like a really close one. And the stuff we're working on now, I'm really fascinated by. But the stuff I had the most fun doing over the last 10 years is definitely things like going to Aruba.
Yeah, that was fun.
Like going to Aruba or going to Tribal Clash and winning that event, or jumping out of an airplane, or all the fun activities that I'm doing now is like, that's to me like probably the most interesting story is the one that we're writing now.
You have to, when you've got so many different moving parts and so many opportunities, you kind of have to just, it's a total cliche, but you have to live in the moment and just appreciate what you're doing at that moment in time.
Yeah, and write your future.
Yeah, for sure. In terms of like just another favourite question, so if you look at the content that you guys have created the last couple of years, what has been you've done a lot of stuff, a lot of fun stuff. I don't think there's an episode that isn't enjoyable, but what's been the sort of highlights from that you've enjoyed the most since the channel
definitely
started?
Probably those things I just mentioned. So we get asked this question every now and then. Probably one of my favorites was Tribal Clash in 2020. That was February 2020. We had just finished this crazy trip through Spain and Europe and London, and felt really sick, and then came home and shot another episode, and then went directly. So we'd been shooting for like 20 days straight, took a day off, skied one run, then got on an airplane to Australia, got to Australia, slept like 24 hours straight, jumped out of an airplane and went to this event and competed with with an awesome team and won the event. That was definitely one of the highlights of the episodes. Disney moment for sure. Hawaiian Trail Run was just beautiful, and insane views of the island, and really personal relationships that were built on that trip. Aruba was, both trips to Aruba have been just insanely cool and fun, and gives you appreciations for the international community and love that CrossFitters share, because you can go anywhere in the world and roll up into a CrossFit gym and you feel like family, because you all speak the same language in a way. And so those are probably 3 or 4 that come to mind of my favorite episodes. And then probably one last one was we always talk about like the coolest thing that's come about. Like, we're doing really cool things, but it's the relationships and it's the rooms that we've been able to get into as a result of what we're doing now that make this the most valuable thing we've ever thought possible. And it's friendships like Brooks Lake and going to his lake house and spending a week there. Like, those have been not only the funnest episodes, but just like life things that you wanted to do that we have the opportunity to do it now.
You could see in that episode as well that came through, that it was just like, this is amazing, this is awesome.
Yeah, that was an amazing week.
Yeah, sure. In terms of you and Marston, then how did that, I'm trying not to ask you questions that everyone else wants to ask you, but how did that relationship develop? How did you guys come together and just get on so well?
So weirdly enough, like, he grew up across the street from my wife. We didn't put that together until we had known each other for like a year. But Marston I was working for CrossFit. I was contracted to cover one of their local throwdowns, essentially. So before the CrossFit Games started in 2011, the route to qualify for the CrossFit Games in 2009 was you went to a regional and then the CrossFit Games. 2010, that wasn't big enough. So they had these things called sectionals, which were really low, small weekend local events from February to early March. And I went to the Salt Lake City sectional here, just up the road, and he showed up to film his girlfriend and was like, "Hey man, like, I noticed it's just you filming this event. Could I come shoot my girlfriend? And if I do, I'll give you access to my footage." And I was like, "Sure, dude. Like, we'll just divide and conquer. You take that side, I'll shoot this side. And if your girlfriend's doing really well, like, just stay on her and I'll get the rest of it." And he was like, "Awesome." So I gave him floor access. He gave me his footage. He showed up in my apartment like 2 days later with a really clean and organized thing. And I liked the way that he shot, hard drive. So I got all the footage from him and I was like, this guy's awesome. I put him in touch with CrossFit and said, hey, if you guys need more videographers, I know how much work you're giving me. Like, you might want to give this guy a chance. And so he started working for CrossFit. We didn't collaborate for 4 or 5 months later, but then on and off, we would do things probably every other month together until I moved to CrossFit in the fall of. I'd been working at CrossFit headquarters for about 6 months. I was producing a pilot for ESPN, and I was like, I need Marsden because he's the most talented shooter that we have on the team, shooter editor on the team. And so he flew out and helped me produce that. And then when we got the contract from ESPN before the CrossFit Games, I was like, dude, I need you to move to Santa Cruz. Like, we've got to produce 17 shows for ESPN. Like, I need your help. And so he was like, okay. He always saw me going down as like a test bunny for himself. So he would call me and ask me questions about what the environment was like, what the housing situations were like. And he wasn't quite ready to move. But when I was like, no, dude, I need your help, he was like, okay, I'm here. And so from 2011 on, we worked really closely together and became really close friends throughout the 8 years that we worked together at CrossFit.
Your personality on camera is obviously like bundles of energy, full of energy. Both of you guys are just like full throttle. Is that just something that naturally switches on as soon as the camera comes on, or is that just how you live your life 365, 24/7?
I mean, like right now, people, when they talk to me one-on-one, they're like, man, you're a lot more mellow than I expected. But I'm like, yeah, like I'm just chilling in my living room right now. Like the environment's like very one-on-one. And if I'm like, you turn the volume up based on what the atmosphere is like. So the atmosphere right now is it's much more intimate than if I'm in a room full of 200 people or 50 people or 20 people working out. That's why I think it felt very natural when we did acid bath and we're goofing around, or when we're rolling around Wadapalooza acting like lunatics, because that's just kind of how we are. Like if I went with my buddies to a concert, that's the way we would act at the concert. Sure. And when we go to the gym, that's how we act at the gym. And so we always have fun. It's always been a play. Like for me, the gym has always been my recess. Like in elementary school, you would get 15 minutes or 30 minutes at lunch to go play on the playground. This is my playground, and I'm going to turn it up to 11 and rock out. And so that's the personality that those moments are the most interesting moments to film. And so the camera's on us when we're at 11. And so it's very natural. None of it's made up really. But we definitely turn up the volume a little bit to make it more goofy, because we know it looks funnier on camera, or it's just like how ridiculous we look. Like, we appreciate that and have fun with it. We take our work very seriously, but we don't take ourselves very seriously.
100%. One sort of period that wasn't quite as, goofy as you said, it doesn't sound as good come from a Scot as it does from an American to say goofy, but was just around COVID, and obviously around all the controversy that CrossFit went through last year. And I remember sitting down very vividly when you guys decided that this was a story that had to be told. You wanted to get out, you wanted to just show how diverse the community was. What did you take from that experience, and how important did you feel it was to tell that story, and how privileged did you guys feel to have that institutional knowledge but be removed enough from it that you had almost the authority to tell it better than anyone else could?
I mean, that's we're still telling that story, right? Like, and to me, I think going into it, people might be critical of the way we've covered that, because the community is very diverse, but we always knew that that's not why there was the issues that happened. Yeah. Having worked with the company, yes, there should be more diversity in their content. Me personally, and what my role was to cover, I always talk, it might be to a fault, covered the top athletes of the sport. And it didn't matter if they were female, male, where they were located. If you were winning, we were going to put a camera on you. Yeah. And then there was a handful of other really cool personalities, but they all kind of fit into that. Like, anyone we've covered could theoretically have made it into the top 5 to 10 at the CrossFit Games any given year they competed. we always knew that the problems that were coming out of HQ were personality driven and not racially driven.
Yeah.
That was just the straw that broke the camel's back. And even like, but to answer your question, we were very nervous to tell that story, because what we've always been is pro athlete. Like, I came back to cover the CrossFit sport, not because I cared about the company, but because I cared about the relationship and sport that I've helped build. And so do I come back and voice my opinion about what's happening and have that in turn affect my relationship with CrossFit, and therefore in turn my effect in being able to tell the story of the athletes, because I'm not given access because I've said things that don't align with HQ's opinions, then I'm not doing my ultimate job and what I want to be doing to the best that I can. And so we wanted to tell as much as we could without our voice, but through our medium.
Yeah. There was one of our coaches at the box here. He had just gotten seminar staff maybe 6 months or so when everything blew up. And he had that moment where, you know, people are on the phone saying, you know, he's questioning himself. Almost like he just got his dream job and he's doubting, he's wondering what's going on. He's, you know, until he heard from HQ themselves. You're almost, until the dust settles, you're immediately associated with something that people think the worst of. But you guys, in terms of your association with the sport, were even closer to that. Did you have that moment as well, or were you confident that your storytelling would be one of the vehicles to sort of get the right story out there?
Yeah, I think I became very nervous, especially when I had major news outlets reaching out and asking me questions about my former employer. We were nervous because we didn't want to burn bridges. We were also nervous because like this thing that we had helped build and loved looked like it was burning to the ground.
Yeah.
And it looked like for like 2 weeks, it was like every decision being made, we were like, oh no, like, how is this happening? Like, what is going on over there? But I also knew two things. I always kind of knew that there was a few key people at CrossFit that really steered the ship one level but below those that were making these big public statements, that I was like, if those guys are still there, the CrossFit Games can still happen and it can still be wildly successful. And it can be a cool event. But for us as a business and as a brand, Buttery Bros, we've always sort of like, I never wanted to be limited by CrossFit. So we associate and work with brands that aren't just CrossFit very specifically, because we want to be beyond just this community, because I think that helps everybody if we're reaching people who are interested in action sports, because we're associated with Blenders classes. That brings more people into CrossFit gyms and also gets our reach out to people that we like doing action sports with. Yeah. So like we made decisions in that term. So as long as those brands understood that we were separated one level, it worked out really well. Also, CrossFit had canned us very publicly. And so most people that had any knowledge about the community, like, understood, wow, CrossFit's falling apart. These guys kind of got out at a great time and have a very successful thing. Let's collaborate and work with them, because that seems like something that's going smoothly. So it was nerve-wracking I was more nervous for athletes and gym owners than I was for what I had going on personally.
And could you sense that when you guys hit the road? Could you sense that the athletes and the affiliate owners themselves were sort of nervous about what was coming down the road? Oh yeah. Every gym you talk to, you had different reactions. Like that was one thing we did on that trip, the first couple episodes, which is we would ask affiliate owners, like, okay, what are you doing? How do you feel? What do you think? And then all our conversations with the athletes were, a lot of them had to happen off camera, because no one felt comfortable talking on camera about what was happening, because you know, tweets were being made that no one understood, or accusations were coming out, and you'd call an athlete and they'd be bawling because they just announced that they were no longer competing at the CrossFit Games, and this thing that they've been working hard for
for 4 years straight, and they have a dream of being on a podium there, and they're like, no, I can't represent this.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was gnarly to a lot of degree, but I learned earlier on in my life, like, and I talk to my wife about this all the time, I can't control what CrossFit's doing. I can't control those circumstances. So for me as a person, like, I'm like, okay, that sucks. What's the next workout we're going to go do? Like, what's the next food we're going to go eat? Let's navigate these things one step at a time and find the positives while we're dealing with these huge negatives, and figure out what we can do to be patient, get all the information, and then pick the best route forward.
And all of this was happening during COVID. Now, obviously the world has just sort of imploded as a result of this thing. But what was that like as you're going through these communities and you're seeing different businesses struggling, adapting, not sure if they can stay open? That must have been really difficult.
That's still something that we're seeing today. Like even 8-9 months after that specific road trip, that was our first trip out since from March. Like, that was our first big trip around, and really, like, it's very similar now, which is some gyms are open, some people have masks, some places are completely shut down, and it's up to the government in those specific cities or towns or states to determine in the states who's able to be open. And then beyond that, like, we haven't had any experience in London, but I have a manager over in London and other people that I collaborate with there that are shut down, and they have been for the 4th time. And I'm like, dude, how, like, if I had to do what I did for those 5 weeks 4 times, like, that's a long time to be stuck in my house. Like, I'd be making life changes. We're like, for a perfect example, I'm with my buddy Julian, who's on the show often. He makes our graphics. He's a phenomenal dancer, rubber ankles. He just came out to Texas with us over the weekend because he's like, I don't want to be in California. They're shut down. And I'm like, you've been there for this whole time. Move to Utah. Like, move out of that location. That's not sustainable. That's not fun to me. Like, I can't feel that constrained. So I'm very fortunate that I'm in a location where that's not the case. I'm able to go to the gym. I'm able to live a pretty normal life. But my heart goes out for all those people that are struggling with it. And the best thing that I feel like I can do is continue to inspire people to live a healthier life and get to those gyms when they eventually open, or work out between now and then. And so I think bringing a fun light to fitness is sort of, it's more important now than it has been ever. Yeah. Because 100%. people need to be reminded that this is a playground for adults.
Well said. Going back to your sort of creative mind and, you know, what you do, because I don't want to make it all about the nuts and bolts of CrossFit. I'm really interested in you as a filmmaker and stuff like that. Do you guys both go into these projects thinking, okay, we're going to inspire people with this, or is it a blend of fun, or do you feel now the pressure of you've got so many subscribers, you're so well known? Do you ever worry that the pressure of being who you are sort of not compromises, but almost stifles that creativity?
No, it opens it for me. Like who doesn't want to go bigger and have more fun? Yeah. That's the challenge, right? Yeah. And then also the other thing we've learned, like, it's just noticing what the audience is talking about, noticing where comments are going. And also, like, there's a fun blend of seeing what your audience wants and then recognizing what you want. Because if you just did what the audience wanted, you would end up doing the same thing over and over again, and you wouldn't grow. And so there's a fun blend of moments where it's just talking heads and you're having a fun conversation, or the conversation is about something that's key or important or inspiring, to then also wild and crazy moments where you're feeding a flamingo, or you're hanging off the back of a boat, lip singing a song with dancers from Dancing with the Stars, or you're like you have to find really fun and big things to make it entertaining for your audience, while also maintaining the intimate relationships which are those in between moments where you're having interesting conversations with interesting people.
That's a very, very good answer. What's next? What's coming down the line for you guys in 2021?
So right now, we just literally, like, I landed 30 minutes ago and then came home and hopped on this call. We just got back from Texas. We're taking the next few weeks to flesh out the 2020 documentary. And then also we produced this series called Proven, which covers the 2019 sanctional season. So there's 3 episodes there that cover 3 sanctionals before the 2019 CrossFit Games Open. So it's like 2 years old at this point, but it's some of your favorite CrossFit athletes competing in really intimate moments that happen behind the scenes at those locations. And they're very much like a prequel to our 2019 documentary, The Fittest. The 2020 documentary is coming along really well. I'm really excited about it. Diving into it here immediately after this call. And then after that, we have some really fun Buttery Bros shows lined up with some people that are both, we're loading up for the Open. So we'll see what we do for that. And then we have we're connecting with some people that are very different, but still fitness related, but are not in CrossFit. But are 2 of the weirdest personalities in the space. And I'm really excited about it.
And you've sort of dabbled in that with some, with other athletes, other sportsmen and women that aren't necessarily in CrossFit. I think you have to, I guess you feel it's important just to always have a variety of people on your show.
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to that, which is we've learned in CrossFit that, like, we call it the asshole barrier, but like there's not a lot of douchebags that want to come suffer and better themselves to the degree that CrossFitters do, right? Yeah. Like there's a handful that don't, that do and come in and do this. And there's a couple of jerks, but like for the most part, if you come in and you suffer like this, you probably think very similar to us.
Yeah. So
when you go out and you hang out with a bodybuilder, they have very different life goals and work out very differently. And so but that you find things that you can relate on and you just hope that you get along.
Yeah.
So for the most part, with any CrossFitter, I'm like, yeah, we'll get along. We're going to crush it. With people outside of that, like one of the most notable was we worked out with this awesome woman named Whitney Simmons.
Yeah.
But we had I'd met her 2 or 3 times before we actually put her on camera and worked out with her. And it went really well. And she was a ton of fun. And we were wearing butt pants and looked ridiculous.
That's a great episode.
Yeah, it was a win-win.
I get the sense that time is running out, so I won't keep you too long. To your point that you made a minute ago, you've just come off a plane, you've jumped on a call with some random guy that you don't know. Like, how do you have to learn to say no to people, or is it just something you enjoy doing? When do you switch off? When do you have free time?
Oh, I'm not very good at saying no. So if I just say no, I just kind of ignore it. But sometimes, anytime I get the chance to talk to people and get to know and tell our story, like back to one of your very first questions was like, has it hit you that you guys are very big? And it's like, no, man, like, especially with COVID, like your interaction with the actual public is very small and minimal and restricted. So like we've had a year of growth where we've not interacted with people on a regular basis like we did in 2019. So to some degree, we've like doubled our subscriber base, but we don't really notice a difference on a day-to-day thing. It will be, so I try to say yes and just hang out with as many people as possible because I like getting to know other people, and we feel very honored, or I feel very honored to be able to tell my story because I'm honored to have this story. So if people want to listen to it, I'm happy to tell it. Final question before you go, because I get the sense that either kids or family are looking over. Yeah, my wife just came and saw me for the first time, so I mean, just that. And it's relevant to that. You know, you touched on it right at the beginning of you wanted to do something for you, something that your kids could see. When you when you look back at your body of work, when you consider everything that you've done and everything that you're going to do, how much of because I want this to be about people's legacies in their chosen field. Is that at the heart of what you do in terms of
those closest to you being proud of what you do?
Oh, 100%. And I don't know if my kids are going to be proud of me shaving Marston's chest or wearing butt pants and doing some of the silly things we do. But I think that there's an appreciation and there's something very cool. Like, I remember listening to a book, Creativity Inc., and it talked about the creation of the Pixar studios through and Steve Jobs' relationship with that. And the general manager, I think, of Pixar talking about how interesting it was that Steve Jobs is over here at Apple doing these insane things, and he's developing the iPhone, which is it changed the world, right? But he also had this respect for the arts when making Toy Story or their movies, because a movie is something like 30 years from now, this is going to be obsolete.
Yeah.
But the story of Toy Story is not. And movies like Lady and the Tramp are popular 40 years after they are created. To some degree, the way we consume media is very different, but I'm extremely proud of the legacy of creating the movies that I have. And then even more so proud of the 88 or 89 episodes of the Buttery Bros that we put out there that are forever. I mean, that's like 40 hours of content of Heber Cannon and Barston Sawyer's acting ridiculous and working out with best friends. And that's something that I think has helped others be inspired to want to work out and do fun things as well. And so there's a legacy of, on two fronts there of the art of documentary filmmaking that we've dabbled into, and then the story of what we've done for ourselves through our own business in the last 2 years.
Well, that feels like a good place to sign off on. Thank you for being guest number 1 on the Legacy Pod. I really, really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to the Legacy Pod. If you enjoyed what you heard, please like, subscribe, or share through word of mouth. Hopefully there's going to be a lot more content coming over the weeks, months, and years, and I look forward to being on this journey with you guys. See you in the next episode.